There's a whole generation that doesn't like to use a phone, and it's causing problems in the workplace. We're talking about Gen Z, those born between 1997 and 2012. Lee Richardson is a licensed professional counselor and founder of the Brain Performance Center. She's joining us with more on this. Lee, talk to us about the problem.
Well, you know, when you think about it, being a baby boomer, I grew up with TV. It was just a normal thing to have. And Generation X, they grew up with the big computer revolution. And millennials, they grew up with the internet. And now Gen Z, I mean, they've had all of that. When you think about it, the phone was launched in 2000. The first iPhone was in 2007. But they didn't need it to talk. I mean, they used it to connect to the web. They used it for Wi-Fi, for, bandwidth, to play games. It's never been a major tool that they use to talk.
Is that something that's going to change, or is that just a new reality that also is going to play into the workplace at some point? Part of Generation Z already in there, but for others who aren't, that people are going to have to deal with, and business is going to be a lot different than it's been.
Well, you think about the number of businesses now that have the team chats that stay open on the screens, so that if you need something, you don't get up and walk down the hall and say, "Hey, Lee, have a question." You just get in the team chat, type your question in, and you usually get an answer pretty quickly. So I think it's becoming more and more ingrained in the way we do business, particularly after the pandemic.
Is this a good thing, a bad thing, or is it just a different thing? You're kind of the expert on this. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are it's a bad thing. Because the most important thing that we have are our relationships with our friends and our family. And communication, I work with a number of individuals and couples that have problems with their communications. And, part of that is that everybody's brain processes information differently. But if you're not even comfortable having the conversation, it's going to be pretty dysregulated. It's going to be hard to follow your train of thought. Think about it, how hard it is. For me, when I've got this stuff going in my head, and I want to write it down. And I stop and I think about it. And it's a real effort to catch everything, all those thoughts that are going on in my head, and transfer them to paper. And I'm sure it works just the opposite, too. If you're so used to processing that information with a text, and then you have to stop and think about how you're going to say it, that's a whole new way to process information. But why I think it's a bad thing is I think that we're missing out. How do you get close to somebody? How do you do an interview for a job over a text?
Yeah, I mean, those are all exceptionally good points. I think most people would agree with that. I know that this research out of Australia that kind of, leads us to our conversation today uses the word anxious. Or something similar when it comes to Gen Z, and I don't want to say every member of Gen Z, but certainly Gen Z as a whole, speaking on the phone, using a phone in the way that we were all brought up to use a phone. When you think of the word anxious, I mean, does it lead to do some people sweat it out, or some people shaking? They'll just do anything to not do it, or is it more of a personal preference to text? Or to do things like that, or to FaceTime or something like that, as opposed to actually just having an audio conversation on the phone with the thing up to your ear?
Well, the word anxious can mean a lot of things. And I personally believe the body keeps score of everything that's going on in the brain. So if you're starting to feel some anxious, maybe you do shake. Maybe you start to sweat. Maybe you get dizzy. Maybe your heart starts beating so fast that it scares you. And anytime, I think being anxious is a normal reaction when you have to do something that you haven't done very often, and you're not really sure how to do it. And they have no problems with the technical piece, which someone like me probably would. But they have a problem with organizing their thoughts, turning that finger action into words. And anytime you do something that you're not really, am I doing it? Am I saying the right thing? Am I saying too much? Am I saying too little? You get that negative talk going on in the brain, then it does make you anxious.
Lee Richardson is a licensed professional counselor, I should say, and founder of the Brain Performance Center, joining us right now. So, Lee, the logical follow-up is, what do you do about it if somebody decides that this is in fact a thing, or let's say a business calls you, or let's say someone in Gen Z calls you and says, "Listen, Lee, I've got this problem. How do I solve this problem? How do I make it easier to talk on a phone?" What advice do you have?
Well, it's pretty simple. And that is practice. And a lot of times, practice, you don't have to have a real conversation. It's just like when I'm rehearsing, I'm going to do a presentation in front of a big audience. I'll rehearse it. Sometimes I'll even stand in front of the bathroom mirror and do it. And my, practice makes you more comfortable. So practice talking and practice into a phone, but practice talking to your family. Who are you the most comfortable with? Those family, those friends that you're really comfortable with. Practice your conversational skills. And as parents or good friends or siblings, we can all do some coaching. One of the most important things when you're talking to people, call them by name. And you don't have to do that when you're texting.
What I was about to ask you, a lot of people will hear me say what I'm about to say, and they'll say, only somebody who works in the media would ever say this. Do you want to record yourself? Do you want to listen to yourself, kind of have a conversation with somebody else? Of course, they know that you're doing this, and then go back and listen and try to, hear where you sounded good, where you didn't sound good, where there may be problems. Can that help you become more comfortable having conversations, whether it's on the phone or even in person? Because I think this is actually a much larger issue that you're talking about.
I think that's a great idea, but I think that we tend to find what we're looking for, and if we think we're awful on the phone and we play it back, what are we going to hear? We're going to hear the parts that we could have done better at. So if you're going to do that, do it with somebody that can kind of help coach you through it. Oh, man, listen to that. Listen how great you sounded when you said that. Because if left to our own devices, we may not get as much out of that as we could with just a little bit of coaching.
Lee, in the time we have left, let me flip it around for a second, because I think some people will hear this and they'll kind of giggle to themselves when they say, all right, so people of a certain generation, people of a certain age grew up with telephones and they talk on the phone and they talk and they talk and they talk and conversations go on forever. But you look at Gen Z and they're able to do what I think many of us can't do, which is pick up a phone, send a 4-word text and an emoji, and kind of communicate in the same, in that short little message, what it may take other people 15 minutes to get through on the phone. Is there some validity to that?
Oh, absolutely. It's all about balance. I mean, there are days that I would much rather talk with somebody that's going to say 3 words to me than 30 minutes.
Lee, thanks. That's Lee Richardson, a licensed professional counselor and founder of the Brain Performance